Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and respected media colleagues, welcome to UNDP Afghanistan COVID-19 Socioeconomic Impact Assessment Node 4 launch event. I will quickly go over the agenda of the event today, and that is as follows. By the way, my name is Fazl Rahim. I'm a communications officer with UNDP Afghanistan. The event is as follows. We will have an opening remarks by His Excellency Ramez Al-Akbarov, Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General for Afghanistan and the UN Resident Coordinator for Afghanistan. It will be followed by a brief introduction of the Node 4 by His Excellency Abdullah Al-Zardari, United Nations Development Program Representative for Afghanistan. Then we will have a presentation on the Node 4 by the co-author of the Node, Shebnam Shaheen. She will do the presentation via Zoom from Washington, D.C. After the presentation, we will have a panel discussion and a Q&A session where participants and our media colleagues can ask any questions they might have. The panel discussion will include His Excellency Harun Mir, Senior Advisor to the First Vice President of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, His Excellency Ismail Rahimi, Deputy Minister of Finance, who hopefully will be able to join via Zoom, His Excellency Mohammad Nabi Surush, the Deputy Minister of Ministry of Economy, and Dr. Omar Joya from the Biruni Institute. At the end of the panel discussions, media colleagues may ask their questions if there might be, and then we will have a closing remarks by Mr. Al-Zardari. Now, I would like to call upon His Excellency Ramez Al-Akbarov to give his opening remarks.
My colleagues, friends, guests, such a pleasure to be here today. It is such an important day that we are talking about the response to the COVID-19, the impact of the COVID-19, what a year 2020 all of us have lived, and what an impact we have seen around the communities. It is so important that as the world is moving through the COVID-19 pandemic, that we take a stock of the lessons we learned, we look at the impact which it has made on our communities, and we start to understand the depth and the breadth of the impact. At today's meeting, first of all, I would like to thank for UNDP and for putting this report. I would like to recognize the leadership of the Office of the First Vice President, who are here present today, recognize all the distinguished members of the international community, and the representatives of the embassies, corporations, and all of those colleagues from the think tanks, media, and academic institutions present here today to discuss this impact. We lived an interesting year, 2020, a year which have tested our resolution, tested our capacity, and tested our solidarity. And at the end of this year, as we are approaching, now we are measuring the impact. And the impact is profound. It is at the levels of individuals, at the levels of the communities, it is at the level of each and every place in the country and around the world. What today's report prepared by the UNDP is very important, because Afghanistan is on the crossroads. It's on the crossroads of achievement of the sustainable development, on the crossroads of the peace process, on the crossroads of development. And despite of every challenge and every difficulty which the Afghan society has experienced, the COVID-19 had tested again the solidarity, the resolution, and the capacity of the country. Some of the key findings of the report are telling us that the impact is profound. You will find out from the report that at least $300 million is required for immediate bridging the gap for attainment towards the SDGs. 250 million are required for immediate emergency interventions, and most importantly, about $2.5 billion are required for social protection measures. The report also provides us with some very interesting pathways of how to address the challenge and how to address the needs specific to elderly, specific to women, specific to the displaced population. Because even within this envelope, we have to prioritize those who are most in need. I must say that from the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemics, United Nations system in Afghanistan responded in the most robust and organized way. World Health Organization, UNICEF, the entire members of the World Food Program, UNDP, all of the agencies have gathered together to provide the much required assistance to the efforts of the Afghan government and the Afghan communities. We have provided more than 14 laboratories, testing laboratories, considerable amount of equipment, ventilators, and of course, sanitation supplies and individual protection equipment. And this work continues. I would like to congratulate UNDP. I understand it was just a day before that you have opened a new hospital also in Jalalabad, which provides the state-of-the-art treatment facilities and the required assistance to the population in Jalalabad. And it is a dedicated police force hospital, I understand, which is the state-of-the-art hospital. This is just another example of how we are working together. As we are moving forward under the leadership of the presidency of the first vice president's office of the ministries, as we are finalizing ANPDF 2, which is an important document which will mainstream the future development paths of Afghanistan, we now have to take this modeling work, this analytical work into the perspective. And we have to see how all together we can continue to push to bridge the gap, to go back on the track of development, and to see that economic prosperity and the development of Afghanistan in the context of the COVID-19 continues. In this context, I would like to thank all the colleagues who are present today, congratulate UNDP, congratulate analytical institutes which have contributed to this work, thank again the leadership of the presidency in providing the directions to this important work. I would like also to welcome colleagues online. I'm looking forward for your active contribution, active participation, and getting together around the new Afghanistan National Development Plan, and subsequently around the One UN framework, which we will delve into to support this and to reflect in the impact of the COVID-19 and how altogether we can work to the attainment of sustainable development goals. Afghanistan will be able to make that progress. We're sure that that solidarity will carry us forward in the most strong and forceful way. Thank you very much again, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Al-Akbaro. And now I would like to call upon Dr. Madari to give an opening remark and introduce the report. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here today. I will change a little bit in my speech and ask to have a 1-minute standing ovation for the victims of Kabul University attack, because this meeting is with Kabul University Afghan Center. Please. Thank you very much. It's a real privilege to have you present here today for the launch of the 4th UNDP policy note, COVID-19 socioeconomic impact, with focus on fiscal options to respond to coronavirus. Today's event and the series of COVID-19 papers previously published by UNDP aim to document the impacts of the virus on development in Afghanistan, with an aim of encouraging and channeling our collective efforts towards positive long-term socio-economic development of the country. To achieve this vision, however, and begin to transition into a COVID-19 normal world, we must be reflective and conscious of the challenges that the country has had and continues to experience, while recognizing the extraordinary resilience of its people. This launch was co-organized and was initially planned the people of Afghanistan. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for the commitment to working towards a more prosperous future for Afghanistan, and hope that you find this event interesting and useful. I would like now to introduce Ms. Shibnam Shaheen, the co-author of this paper, who will provide a detailed overview of the reports. It will be followed by a panel discussion. And may I also say that COVID-19 has affected us as a working group. The lead author of the report, Dr. Shukri Thabit, is undergoing dramatic COVID-19 impact around him in his family in Tunisia. So let's all wish him best of health and best of luck, and thank Dr. Shibnim Shaheen for accepting to present the note on his behalf and on behalf of the UNDP modeling team today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abdullah.
Okay, good. We had we had a connection issue, so hopefully everybody, all colleagues are now connected back to the colleagues who are virtually joining.
Yes, we had lost you for a while. Good afternoon, everybody. I will share my PowerPoint with you. Today, I will talk about the 4 notes we produce at the UNDP regarding socioeconomic impact assessment of the pandemic. I will first start with a brief summary of the main messages from the 3 notes, and then make a more detailed presentation on the 4th note. So our first note was published in April this year. We looked at the short-term disruption effects of the pandemic and tried to estimate the likely GDP loss due to the pandemic. When we started this exercise, we used a multi-country computable general equilibrium model in which we had also introduced Afghan data, and this was done for the first time. So we looked at this global pandemic from international ripple effects on the Afghan economy and proposed some solutions, some regional collaboration and some even global collaboration to fight this pandemic. So the estimate as early as in April came up very significant, like Abdullah said, and His Excellency Alabakro. It was around 6% of GDP by the end of 2020. And the poverty impact was also dramatic. We estimated an increase to 68% from the 2019 level of 55%. So given these challenges, we first focused on the emergency needs for health interventions to contain the pandemic. Back then, the ministry had estimated as $250 million immediate need to fight the pandemic in the next 3 to 6 months. Given that the domestic revenue mobilization will be almost impossible in such short period of time, the report recommended that the government should look aggressively for additional donor money. Donor money was pledged somehow. And then we came up with a little bit expanded analysis and look at additional expenses that may occur beyond the emergency needs for health interventions. And we found that based on this modeling exercise, in addition to the 6% GDP loss, Afghanistan may face 2% more of GDP loss if the needs of $250 additional million are financed by the government. And it may reach 1.3% additional contraction if the government decides to switch revenues from targeted expenditures and concentrate them only on health expenditures. So this was a message that the challenges might increase beyond the 6% immediate loss of GDP. In our second note that was published in July this year, we looked at the social impact of the pandemic. So this time we tried to move away from the big numbers, but concentrate on more targeted interventions, for example, in social policies, in income support. So again, we came up with a big and impossible number to reach for the government, unfortunately. And like His Excellency Alabakro said in the introduction, if Afghanistan needed to allocate resources from its budget, to fight the pandemic and to help the most vulnerable groups, plus to help the recovery, in early recovery from the pandemic, it will mean $3 billion per year, equivalent of 15% of GDP, which is impossible given these challenging circumstances. Then we look at the more targeted options that may occur. So to ameliorate even part of the impact for specific social sectors, still the needed funds were very, very big, beyond the reach of the government budget. For example, to compensate citizens for a small loss in consumption, let's say for the 6 months to come, at 1/3 of the poverty line, across the population, very inclusive policy, it would require 10% of GDP. If during the 6 months following the outbreak of the pandemic, given a half of poverty line, we only target working age adults, it will reach to 6% of GDP. Still, the numbers were very high. And if it is more comprehensive and we aim to reach every citizen, kind of universal basic income, it will require 13% of GDP. So again, we try to focus our intervention recommendations in a more specific groups. So this time we looked at public works to generate some income in the transition from the pandemic to normalized economy, or social pension only to the elderly. Alternatively, income support to internally displaced people and returnees. We came up with 3 affordable, more modest requirements for the budget. Starting with civil works at 1,000 Afghanis per month for 100 days. So a transition period. It will only require 1% of GDP. Another option could be a social pension. Again, 1,000 Afghanis per month, only for 6 months. This will require only 0.25% of GDP. You see how modest these numbers became. Or income support to internally displaced people and returnees, one of the most vulnerable groups. Again, at 1,000 Afghanis per month for 6 months. This will require only 0.5% of GDP. So these recommendations are affordable and it is within the reach of the government, even without additional funds. But we expanded this analysis to more comprehensive reform across the country. So we said, let's think about the savings in the security sector. Reform in the security sector is one of the most debated reforms in the months to come. The overall budget cut is around $600 million. Let's say 2/3 of it, for example, $400 million. It is more than enough to finance these 3 options, these 3 social programs that I mentioned. One step further, let's look at the peace, transition to peace. Based on the literature, this can boost the Afghan GDP by 7% in 1 year, equivalent of 1.3 billion. It is again more than enough to finance these targeted social programs. But if you compare it to the 15% that I started this slide presentation, 15% compared to 7%, there is still a big gap and there is still a big need for the Afghan government from international donors. On this basis, we looked at the medium-term impact of the pandemic. We looked at global picture and also a little bit longer-term commitments for Afghanistan beside ANPDF, the SDG attainment. So this 3rd paper published in September looked at the impact of the pandemic on Asdgs. As you would expect, the impact is very negative, not only on the economic performance, but also in the attainment of Asdgs. Globally, it is the same. Even developed economies, they are going through challenging times. The proof is that globally, the rate of improvement in Human Development Index is expected to decline for the first time this year, first time since 1990. when the composite index of human development was first introduced. So it is a big indicator of the global challenges. For Afghanistan, of course, COVID-19 means a big setback in terms of economic performance, but it does not undermine Afghanistan's long-term commitment to its sustainable development vision. So again, we propose three approaches. As you would remember, I said this is a multi-sector and multi-country model. Even we can run simulations for the global collaboration, regional collaboration cases. So first, we talked about increasing the total factor productivity in agriculture. This will help to decrease food prices and improve the security in nutrition, access to food. So this is a strong link to the SDGs, a strong boost to the SDGs. Then we looked at regional trade. The model allows to run simulations, for example, for decreasing the cost of doing trade between Afghanistan and its immediate neighbors, like Tajikistan, Pakistan, Iran, or Afghanistan's capacity to trade further, like countries like Turkey or beyond, or even sign global trade agreements. So we came up with very significant numbers that this kind of agreements, with a stroke of a pen, that Afghanistan will boost its trade with its partners, and it can improve its GDP by 4%. It can help fight the pandemic, and it can help the recovery from the pandemic. The last simulation we ran was about business environment. If it becomes more conducive to investment, this can boost the economic performance by 2 percentage points. Again, this is something that relies on institutional reforms that can be done very quickly and help Afghanistan in fighting with the pandemic and the economic crisis. Alternatively, if the increased access to loans for private sector, again, is assured through institutional reforms, it can boost the private sector and add to the GDP by 1.6%. Now let me talk to you about the fiscal paper. These simulations were undertaken using the Afghanistan-specific model, which means that it looks in details to the sectors of production in Afghanistan, to households, different group of households, to gender issues, and mainly to the fiscal balances of the government. As you would imagine, this wouldn't be possible to do it for 160 countries that were present in the previous model that I presented. This model is more inward-looking, but gives more details on the fiscal policies that the government may take in fighting the pandemic. So here we are looking mainly to the fiscal space needed to recover from the economic losses. And we assume in the first round that there are no big reforms in the economy, except these specific health interventions, this $250 million. Please keep it in mind. So the big result is that Afghanistan will need approximately 30% more in grants from the international community over the 5 years compared to the previous run. And this is based on the IMF projections in the pre-pandemic era. I will detail this in the next slides. And if you think that this such increase is impossible, given the challenges in the donor countries, then the governments need to adjust its fiscal accounts in a significant way. Again, I will give examples and open the discussion, hopefully, beyond this topic. Of course, in this case, regarding fiscal adjustment, both recurrent and development expenditures will need to be reallocated toward COVID-19 response, starting with social protection and health sector intervention, like we mentioned in the first section of the presentation. Here I am showing the results from both models because we would like to compare different methodologies and give you a full picture of what we have produced so far. So the figure one on the left-hand side shows on the top with the blue line, IMF projections, where Afghanistan was assumed to move from 100 index points, let's say, let's put it a scale to 100 for 2019. And it is supposed to move 24.6 percentage more in 2024. So a significant increase. If you look at the simulations, you will see the gray line is the multi-country model that I introduced to first. And it says that it will only increase only by 1.7% between 2019 and 2024. So almost we can talk about a catch-up and return to the initial point of 2019, initial level of GDP, based on the simulation of the first model. The second model is the Afghan specific model, the orange line. It also predicts a big decline in 2020. Both models predict around 5.5, 6%. And then recovery by 1% starts immediately in 2021. Of course, these are assumptions. And then continues slowly increasing. In 2023, the orange line catches up with the 2019 level, 101.5. So only the recovery to the 2009 level. And then 5%, almost 5% increase on top of it on the last year, 2024. So this recovery pace is very, very slow. This is what we learned from both models. If we look at figure 2, it talks about GDP per capita. It is the main indicator of poverty. As you will see, if you correct these growth numbers by population growth, and if you look at the last bar on 2024, we are estimating around 10%, 9.5% decrease in GDP per capita. Of course, it is very challenging for poverty alleviation policies. So given this first macroeconomic and poverty estimates, we linked them to revenues because the focus was on fiscal policy analysis. Beyond the GDP loss and the increase in GDP in poverty level, of course, the revenues from direct and indirect taxes will also be reduced. The biggest decrease is expected in corporate tax revenue and almost the same level decrease in personal income revenue. The tax revenues from goods and services, they will be reduced, but less, by 10%. And I will show you the figure which will summarize these numbers. However, tax revenues from international trade will be heavily affected. Naturally, international trade was reduced. Even the borders were closed for certain periods of time. So this result was expected. It's also aligned with the World Bank estimates, who estimates that the fall is around 33% regarding taxes from export revenues and tariffs. So let's summarize these findings. On the left-hand side, figure 3 displays the decline in revenues by type of taxation. So starting from the left-hand side, taxes from sales and indirect, they will decrease around 10%. The personal income tax and corporate income tax in the middle, around 16, 17%. The biggest decline is expected in custom duties, export tax, and fees. On the overall, it gives this red barred number, which is 16% decrease in total revenue on average for the government, an alarming indicator. The figure 4 on the right-hand side, it shows the evolution of these decreases through the years. As you will see, sales and indirect taxes, they decrease in 2020 and they almost stagnate to 2024. Customs duties and export taxes, they decrease and they continue to decrease throughout the years to 2024. In the middle, personal income tax and corporate income tax, they decrease and they almost follow the decrease from trade revenues. So these are important indicators for the government. And it also reinforces our analysis that revenue mobilization will be very challenging for this period of time to 2024, where only the GDP will recover to its level to pre-pandemic era. So then we looked at the need for grants, another policy for the government. So this chart summarizes our results. It shows, compared to the IMF scenario, which was built for pre-pandemic era, how much more grants is needed if the government continues to spend as they used to do without changing their policies. So to recover the current expenses and projected planned expenses to 2024, how much more grants are needed? Please look at the pink bar. It is the difference. If we add up the additional grant needed to finance the budgetary expenses, Afghanistan will need 30% more. It means additional $6 billion to cover the government budget losses due to the pandemic. So this is a very significant result, and I'm sure Abdullah would like to discuss it with you. So to wrap up, we can say that Afghanistan faces multiple challenges, but there is more optimism because of reduced political uncertainties and the emergent prospect for peace. The powerful remedy and the most essential one, of course, is international assistance. It should be sustained and it should be powerful enough to help Afghanistan to recover from the pandemic. Continued and predictable donor involvement, even with technical assistance, but mainly through grants, will provide critical support to the government. Therefore, international assistance should be predictable, sufficient, and timely. Regarding Afghan government, our paper recommends that the use of donor funds should be consistent with the needs of the citizens. They should be delivered with greater efficiency and transparency to meet the needs of the most vulnerable. And finally, for the UNDP side, UNDP intends to continue its assistance to Afghanistan in collaboration with other development partners. Will support government to navigate its way through these challenging times in a development path that is sustainable, anchored in SDGs. Thank you very much, and over to you, Abdullah.
Thank you very much, Shabnam. Now, before Abdullah starts opening the open discussion, panel discussion, if from our distinguished guests from panelists, Samir or Dr. Joya would like to have any quick reaction or the SRSG to the presentation, and then Abdullah will take on the discussion. Thank you.
We think that initially, if there's a good, we would definitely
go to the panel.
So why don't you then, sir, please give us your presentation, and then we will let's have the presentations, and then we will have a discussion. Yes, please, Mr. Harun Mir. Thank you very much for being with us. We'd like to listen to you.
Thank you very much. I don't have a presentation. I will just comment on the paper.
Sorry, I think our media colleagues probably would like
Sure.
to hear. Sorry, initially, ideally, would have wanted to sit there.
Panel Q&A almost at the end.
Yeah, but if, even your reactions, if we can have you here, sorry. Because of the mics.
Okay. Thank you very much from all the UN agencies, UNAMA, ED, and particularly thank you from UNDP. We have been interacting and working together with all UN agencies since the inauguration of the new government, and we are very thankful for the all support that we have received from UN agencies, particularly when we with the emergence or the start of pandemic in Afghanistan.
All the mics from the
Sure.
TV station are there.
Yeah, sorry, that was what I meant.
Yes, yes. Our colleagues are here.
I will restart. So I would thank on behalf of the Afghan government, in particular of the Office of the Vice President, the great work that UN in general, all UN agencies, the UNAMA in particularly UNDP has done in order to support the Afghan government to mitigate the COVID-19 crisis. And we have been working since the immigration of the new government very closely with all UN agencies, in particular with UNDP, and in order to address many challenges. Indeed, COVID-19 has been a worldwide pandemic. Unlike many other countries, we don't have the space of maneuver using macroeconomic tools such as monetary and fiscal policies. We have very, very limited space of maneuvering. However, the government, since the beginning, since the start of the pandemic, has done a great job. First of all, we have been able to manage the crisis. Our first worry was to stabilize food price, because we were worried that there will be a sudden increase in inflation in food prices, and that could lead to popular resentment, riots, and all of that. We have been able, through the assistance from the Afghan private sector and also from assistance from our international partners, we have been able to at least stabilize the food prices. But in the meantime, we have all been also working very hard in order to have all the preparation for in order to also reduce the strain on our public health sector. We haven't seen a rush on our hospitals, so that was also a great achievement by the Afghan government. And also we tried to address the immediate needs of the Afghan people. We started with the bread distribution in Kabul and other cities in order to show to the Afghan people that the government is taking care of its citizens. And that was also, in our opinion, a tremendous achievement. And also we are in the midst of distributing food to the Afghan people through the REACH program, and what we call it, this economy. These were the achievements of the Afghan government. But in the meantime, His Excellency President Ghani has also distributed a paper and provided his vision on how to mitigate not only the crisis due to COVID-19, but the aftermath of the crisis. That is what this paper is talking about it, while we know that the pandemic is not yet over. And we, as one of the poorest countries, we might not receive the vaccine like other countries soon. So we will deal with this pandemic for a while. So from the government perspective and the vision that His Excellency the President has provided, well, of course, the most priority for all government is to balance the budget. And we know that we are suffering from revenue generation. It's not just about that we see a big reduction in GDP, but also a big reduction in government revenue generation. But the President announced austerity budget for the government. We have reduced so many unnecessary costs that were not needed, and these are luxury items that the government does not need anymore. But still, since we are working on the new budget, the government has been working on the new budget, and this vision of the President continues for the next few years. And so the simple things is that either for a balanced budget, either you reduce cost or increase revenue. And in that regard, the austerity budget will certainly reduce cost. But in terms of generating revenue, we are optimistic, because we know that there are potential for the government to increase revenue. And one is through good governance. It was also mentioned in this paper. We are very keen to fight corruption in Afghanistan. We also, I'm sure through the media, you are aware that we are losing a big chunk of the Afghan revenue through corruption, in particular when it comes to tariff that we are having on imports. But in the meantime, we could expand the tax basis. You know, Afghanistan, like all other poor countries, we have not been able to tax. We have just we are taxing a limited number of businesses in Afghanistan, those who are legally registered. But we know that the formal economy, the size is very small, but the informal economy is very big in Afghanistan. And also, as the president, working very hard to attract local and foreign investment in our mining sector. We all expect that the game changer in Afghanistan will be investment in mine sector. So we are also working in order to improve and also the process for exploitation of mining sector in Afghanistan, reducing all the bottlenecks and all the challenges that exist in this sector, which is also very important for us. And of course, our priorities are also in PDF and as well as how to align it with SDGs, because hopefully we will be working more on this with Dr. Dardari on SDGs, which is also part of the mission of the Office of the Vice President to work on it. So business environment, of course, we have talked about it. We have been working with the Afghan private sector in order to enable the Afghan private sector to invest more in the country and remove all the challenges that exist, either it is corruption or either it is simple hurdles that they have in terms of not only taxes, but we know that security sometimes is also preventing private sector from functioning properly, and so we are trying to remove all these challenges. And of course, trade is very important. As you know, the vision of the Excellency President Mohammad Ashraf is to expand our ties to all neighboring countries, but including regional countries. So we are not relying anymore on one road for trade. So we are trying to open up other roads, and we have been very successful in it. And one of the reasons we have been able to manage the COVID-19 crisis was that our borders were open. So the import of initial materials such as food stuff and others were never disrupted, even though our border with Pakistan was closed for a significant of time. But through the northern route, we have been able to continue supplying the markets in Afghanistan. Of course, the challenges are big, but we in the government are also working very hard to improve these challenges. We are not very pessimistic about the situation. We see the glass half full. There are a lot of potential. If we are capable of exploiting those potentials, we will be able to recover, but this recovery still requires the assistance from the international community, because our holder is not the Afghan economy, is not to balance budget, is not to recover the COVID-19 crisis. Our priority is also security, peace, and which is also undermining the Afghan recovery, and especially economic recovery. So we are hopeful that by working hard, working together, and learning from the kind of studies that was presented today, we could learn more and adjust the best model for the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mir, and please rest assured that the UN system in Afghanistan will be working to support the vision of His Excellency the President manifested in the Afghanistan National Peace and Development Framework. And we are excited that SDGs are very much now close and integrated in the PDF. And we are committed as UN system, if His Excellency the RC allows me to say, we are committed to supporting the government of Afghanistan in implementing its part in the SDG related areas of the AMPDF and the AMPDF in general. So we are very proud of playing that role. Now, if I may, our friend and Excellency Nabi Saroush, Deputy Minister of Economy, and you all know the Ministry of Economy has been leading the work on SDGs in Afghanistan, and we have been partners with them for years in this very important issue. So, Excellency, the floor is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, Rahimi Saib, Mir Saib, Abdullah Dardari, Alak Barouf Saib, Juya Saib, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really sorry for not being able to join you face to face because I was affected by coronavirus 2 weeks ago, and I struggled to survive. And even now, I feel some negative side side effect of the virus. But yeah, I'm better now, so that's why I didn't want to transfer the disease to others. So first, I would like to thank the UNDP under the leadership of His Excellency Al-Dardari for organizing such a valuable panel discussion event. Definitely such event can provoke and inspire other national and international entities to work on new initiatives and also policy directions to mitigate the socioeconomic threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. If on the SDGs attainment in Afghanistan, let me again thanks for the great presentation Shabnam has delivered. That was really very constructive. It was a great work. I really loved it, and it can help really the government and even private sector to really make decisions based on that. It was a very critical and very analytical work. So on the SDGs attainment in Afghanistan, if I just share my view, it is true to say that we are far behind the implementation of the SDGs because already 4 years passed, and we are still working on the papers, on mostly on the process. But anyway, on the other hand, or on the other side, our joint collaboration with the UNDP, particularly during His Excellency Al-Dardari, when he came, SDGs became a real subject of major socioeconomic debates among the government entities, public, private sector, civil society, and development partners, which paved the way for endorsement of the SDGs by the Cabinet of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan in March 2020. And that was really a great achievement. But no doubt that the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown caused a lot of delays in achieving some of the planned activities, such as SDGs economic modeling, SDGs financing strategy, SDGs costing, SDGs 10-year strategic framework from 2001 to 2030, SDGs localization at the provincial level. So it doesn't mean that we really we are far behind of our plans. Work is ongoing. Maybe some of them are at the final stage, but we really need to focus to really achieve them. As all of you know, that our last ASDGs Executive Committee meeting was on the 18th February 2019, and we have not been able to conduct the meeting since then. And really, it really affected really the process and also the work. And unfortunately, later, because of this, pandemic. But in the before the pandemic, it was election process, and during those days, we could not really conduct meetings, regularly. And now we are very hopeful to resume our Asdgs Executive Committee meeting under the wise leadership of His Excellency First Vice President to accelerate the implementation process and get policy directions and monitor the progress made towards achieving the SDGs. And that's a very great hope. And we hopefully take this initiative and start our SDGs executive meetings as soon as possible. On the linkages between SDGs and ANPDF, I would like to briefly say that, fortunately, the Afghanistan SDGs are now mainstreamed into both the Afghanistan Partnership Framework and the Afghanistan National Peace and Development Framework. And that's a very great news, actually. And we have now an integrated framework in line with the SDGs, but also with a direct focus on medium-term development objectives, which allow us move towards a sustainable path and achieve our priority SDGs. I think that we do need to work on the development of a strong and integrated monitoring and reporting system to make sure that we do make progress on the SDGs and the outcome indicators of the APF and also ANPDF are achieved on time. If I just briefly, share my views on the pandemic affecting the progress, no doubt, as far as COVID's impact on the private and public sector, our findings showed that close to 76% of the micro enterprises operating in the services and manufacturing sector in Afghanistan considered to be the most vulnerable to the lockdown. Small and medium businesses shown even greater level of vulnerability. And the Ministry of Economy actually came with a package, with a support package on that. And we actually tried to really collect all the challenges which are private sector facing, and also especially micro, medium, small and medium enterprises, which were being really badly affected by this pandemic. MSCs in Afghanistan actually provides employment opportunities to over 1.5 million people, assuming that over 80% of the micro and small and medium enterprises were highly vulnerable to the lockdown, and all of them were forced. I can't find a network connection. Please connect and try again. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay. That actually lockdown, and all of them were forced to lay off their employees. And our findings also showed that if the total unemployment rate maybe would jump, if in this case that 1.5 million people are really vulnerable, if they get really affected badly, then maybe the unemployment rate would jump from 24% to 40%, and that is really a very let's say tense scenario. So on the mitigating pandemic, I need to share a few points that the short to medium term priority for the government will be to continue to respond to the shocks faced by our most vulnerable citizens because of COVID-19. And the government is establishing an emergency relief fund to provide all Afghan households with income support for roughly some 2 months. But that may change. It depends to the pandemic tense and to the pandemic measures. So in order to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, again, the Afghan government need to continue its effort in introducing a social protection package in the form of cash transfers or conditional cash transfers, and also like the Sarkhani Mili or bread distribution, with the motive of reaching out to the poor and vulnerable groups in the country, and also a support package for the micro, small, and medium enterprises, which is very much important, to really save these, businesses, because it's a very actually big income, comes in from these, sources into the government, and we have to really save even save these actually businesses, and also save the jobs, because it's a very big portion of the society that are really engaged in these businesses. Also, the government needs to implement more labor-intensive projects aiming to generate emergency income to the people, and that is really very important. Also, very important to really grab our international partners in this very tense time, very in this really pandemic period, considering the fact that Afghan economy is highly dependent on foreign aid, and that foreign aid is declining day by day. And with the help of its development partners, should seek to mobilize resources from different and traditional sources, such as crowdfunding or Islamic finance or blended finance. And that is, I think, is very, very important for the government also to really focus on the private sector, especially on the micro, small and medium enterprises, to really save the jobs and also save the businesses, which is a very big source of income or revenue for the government. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for this comprehensive presentation. And I cannot overestimate the importance of our joint work in the SDG Executive Committee on the accountability and monitoring and evaluation and the follow-up of the SDGs, Afghanistan SDGs, and again reiterate our commitment to support. Now, as we say, ختامها مسك, we are going to ask Dr. Omar Joyer from Biruni Institute to talk to us from the point of view of a very highly sophisticated think tank, of which we are all very proud to be working with in Afghanistan. Please, Dr. Omar. And until you get here, let me say that where I come from, we have Biruni Hospital, Biruni Center of Mathematics, Biruni Institute. I actually thought Biruni was from Damascus, to find out when I came here that he was an Afghan. So it makes me more proud of serving in Afghanistan that Biruni is from here, in addition to many other great names in Islamic culture and civilization. So I don't think we have given Afghanistan its deserved place in cultural dialogue, and we would like to work on this with you as well. This is so important. This country is a bastion of civilization, and it has offered so much, and it can offer so much to the world. And one of those is the Biruni Institute in Afghanistan, with whom we are proud to be partnering. Omar Pasha, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al-Dardi. It's a great pleasure to be here, and we are honored as a local think tank that you have invited us to be part of this panel. Now, if you'll allow me, Mr. Al-Dardi, although I had prepared my talking points in English, perhaps I could speak in Dari, given that most of the audience in local TV, so that there would be a better understanding of the modeling work that we have done. سلام به همه دوستا. من خواستم که صحبت را به فارسی ارائه کنم، چون می‌بینیم که اکثریت دوستا هموطنان خود ما هستند و شاید بهتر باشد که کاری که تحلیلی را که UNDP انجام دادن شاید درست‌تر آدم بتونه رویش صحبت کنه. خب چنان که همه ما می‌داریم پالیسازی و طرح پالیسی‌های اقتصادی بر بنیاد ارقام شواهد میشه. بدون داشتن ارقام و شواهد پالیسی سازی و طرح پالیسی‌های اقتصادی نتایج خود را نمی داشته باشه و اون تأثیری که از اون متوقع است اتفاق نمیفته. و یکی از شیوهایی که ما در علم اقتصاد کار میگیریم به خاطر تحلیل‌های اقتصادی با استفاده از مدل‌های اقتصادی و این مدل‌های اقتصادی از ارقام و شواهد استفاده کرده و تحلیل‌ها را روی پالیسی‌های اقتصادی، پالیسی‌های مالی یا پالیسی‌های پولی یک کشور ارائه می‌کنند. و کاری که شما فعلا امروز نتایجش دیدین تحلیل است بر بنیاد یکی از مدل‌های اقتصادی به نام CG. و این مدل اقتصادی استوار بر ارقام واقعی افغانستان است. ارقامی که از سکتورهای مختلف اقتصادی افغانستان جمع‌آوری میشه و ما در کنون پژوهشی بیرونی افتخار از این داشتیم که امی ارقام یا امی جدول اقتصادی که نیاز برای امی مدل اقتصادی بود تهیه و ترتیب کنیم و این جدول اقتصادی در برگیرنده ارقام اقتصادی از تمامی سکتورهای تولیدی افغانستان است. 38 سکتور تولیدی که ما در زراعت، در صنایع تولیدی و در خدمات داریم و بر علاوه از او ارقام خانوار، سکتور خصوصی، دولت، عواید دولت و حتی تجارت و واردات که در افغانستان اتفاق میفته، تمامی ارقام در یک جدول خاص با هم تهیه و ترتیب میشه که بر بنیاد از این جدول بعد از باز مدل‌های اقتصادی چون CG میتونن تحلیل‌های اقتصادی خود انجام میده. گزارش فعلی UNDP به نظر من بسیار با موقع بود. ما در افغانستان نیاز به همچون تحلیل‌های اقتصادی داریم از بیشتر از گذشته و چنان که همه دوستا شاهد هستند تقریبا 6 یا 8 ماهی که ما در افغانستان توسط کرونا اپیدمی کرونا متاثر گشتیم، تمامی فعالیت‌های اقتصادی کاهش یافت و چنان که در آغاز شیوع کرونا نهاد ما کرونا بیرونی و به همین ترتیب UNDP و بانک جهانی اینا پیش‌بینی‌های خود در همون موقع ارائه داشتند که تا چه اندازه کرونا روی وضعیت اقتصادی افغانستان تاثیر خواهد داشت. پیش‌بینی‌هایی که همه ما انجام داده بودیم، مثلا UNDP منفی 7% رشد اقتصادی را پیش‌بینی کرده بودند و ما البته کم پیش‌بینی ما می‌تونه که زیادتر بود، منفی 8% البته و بانک جهانی هم حدود منفی 7%. ولی آنچه که ما 8 ماه بعد یا 6 ماه بعد می‌بینیم که همون پیش‌بینی‌ها اتفاق افتاده. بیکاری، نرخ بیکاری بلند رفته، عواید دولت کاهش یافته و حتی ارقامی را که اداره عواید یا مدیریت عواید وزارت مالیه هفته گذشته اعلام داشتند تا هنوز دولت افغانستان حدود 140 میلیارد افغانی جمع‌آوری کرده که در حالی که نظر به هدف تعیین شده وزارت مالیه باید 170 میلیارد دلار افغانی می بود که تقریبا 20% کاهش نشان میده و تمامی ازی البته زیادتر از این کاهش در عواید نتیجه پیامدهای اقتصادی کرونا بود که بالاخره اثر کاهش در فعالیت‌های اقتصادی اتفاق افتاده. به همین ترتیب نرخ بیکاری با وجود که ارقام واقعی بر از او فعلا برای امسال ما در دست نداریم، ولی آنچه که تحلیلی را که ما در کنون البیدونی انجام دادیم نشان میده که بیکاری از حدود 39% که در 3 سال قبل ما داشتیم که نظر به یکی از سروی‌های اقتصادی افغانستان توسط اداره ملی احصایه جمع‌آوری شده بود و بررسی شده بود، شاید بیکاری و اشتغال ناقص بر حدود 55% است. یعنی 55% نیروی کاری ما امروز بیکار است و یک تعداد زیاد از این کسان بالاخره تاثیرات اقتصادی کرونا بیکار شدن یا از اشتغال ناقص رنج میبرند. و فعلا البته کار و تحلیلایی که شما امروز شاهدش بودین متوقع هستیم که اداره UNDP بتونه که همچون تحلیل‌ها را بیشتر روش کار کنه. شاید یکی از تحلیل‌هایی که زیادتر مؤثر تمام شود این است که خب کرونا آمد، ما متاثر شدیم، رشد اقتصادی ما تحت صفر رفت، -7 یا -8% اقتصاد ما رشد منفی داشت. خب حال سال آینده ما باید چی کنیم؟ بودجه دولت به چه شکل طرح‌ریزی شود تا بتونیم پس دوباره اقتصاد سر پایش استاد کنیم، یعنی پالیسی‌های احیای اقتصادی ما به چه شکل طرح‌ریزی شود. وزارت مالیه چی کند، افغانستان بانک یا در مجموع دولت افغانستان برای 2 سال آینده به خاطر احیای اقتصادی افغانستان چی کار کند؟ جواب از این سوال بر بنیان تحلیل‌ها و مدل‌های اقتصادی میشه که امروز شما شاهدش بودید و امیدوار هستیم که UNDP همین سلسله گزارش‌ها یا سلسله تحلیل‌هایی که هنوز به نظر من 4مین گزارششان بود، گزارش بعدی را که اینا نشر میکنن شاید اگر روی احیای اقتصادی یا economic recovery که ما میگیم روی احیای اقتصادی میان مدت 2-3 سال آینده اگر این تحلیل انجام بدن شاید برای دولت افغانستان برای بودجه سازی سال آینده زیادتر موثر تمام شد. من صحبت رو اینجا تمام میبخشم و بازم تشکر میکنم از اداره UNDP و این موفقیتشان برشان تشکر.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eloquent as usual. Thank you.
Colleagues, we have got His Excellency Ambassador of Indonesia and His Excellency Ambassador of the Republic of Tajikistan also joining us virtually. همکارای عزیز در جمع همکارایی که در جمع همکارایی که در از طریق کانفرنس با ما وصل هستند، سفیر جمهوری اندونزیا و سفیر جمهوری تاجیکستان هم با ما وصل هستند. Mr. Ambassadors, if you have any reactions, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Apa mau dibilang? Ya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for the committee and all our friend, brother and sister. How great today we're talking about something that our challenge in Kabul or in Afghanistan. I believe from you, all of us from UNDP can decrease difficulties, and I believe I have to learn a lot from Afghan people, especially how they survive, sacrifice, work hard for this pandemic, and to get the herd immune for their family, for their people in a small village. Alhamdulillah. Of course, this is because of all of you to think, always thinking of the people of Afghanistan connecting with the pandemic. We hope that the pandemic in Afghanistan not going to the second phase, but everything become decreased because of your working hard. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you very much. If His Excellency, the Ambassador of Tajikistan, would like to say something.
جناب سفیر صاحب کاملو اگر میوت بکنیم
Let's unmute from here.
Just try to.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for the organizers of this meeting. The Republic of Tajikistan, as a brotherly country, always supports the people and the government of Afghanistan in process of restoring social and economic situation in Afghanistan. Also, we support the initiatives of international community to ensure peace, stability in Afghanistan, and also to restoring social and economic situation in Afghanistan. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. May I ask first our colleagues who are joining virtually if they have any questions or comments before we come to a discussion in the room here? No, I have no question. I have no question. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you. Anyone else virtually online have any questions or comments? You can please step into the fold and ask your questions, if any. Okay, so let me then go to the go back to this meeting room. Would you like to organize questions from the colleagues?
دوستا و دورای حاضر در تالار و دورای مطبوعات اگر حالی فرصت پیدا است که اگر از دورای مطبوعات چیزی سوال باشه آقای دکتری و اگر دوستان لطف بکنم معرفی کنم.
Thank you. My name is Haidar from Pro News. I've got two questions from Mr. Al-Dardari. My first question is that do we have any statistics that regarding from losses of the pandemic, how much have it costed Afghan economy since the outbreak? Because we haven't seen any statistics about this in any report, but we do want to have, but in a way it's not possible. And my second question that I would like to have Mr. Lewis comment on this also, while there is a need of a 30% increase in the grants in the next 5 years, but at the same time we heard you say we did that the grants will not only increase, but the donors will decrease the grants in the coming time. So do you see any chance of an increase in the donor grants in the next conference?
First of all, on the impact, I think the 4 reports that we summarized and the last report that you have a copy of gives a very good idea on the total losses so far and projected until 2024.
Abdullah, sorry.
I think you want me to. Yeah. Yes. So first of all, the report, this report and all the other reports that we published and also published by the World Bank and other organizations actually give you a very good idea about the losses. The accumulated losses are, to say the least, considerable. The projected accumulated losses to the Afghan economy will make it very difficult for Afghanistan to capture the pre-COVID-19 trajectory of growth. This is the most important thing we need to consider. What is the opportunity cost? What did Afghanistan lose? Because as you could see, in order to go back to 2019, pre-COVID, we need at least 4 years of progressive growth. So, which means there will be reforms, there will be funding, and there will be enhanced trade, there will be social protection schemes. All of that are a condition to capture the pre-COVID-19 growth trajectory of Afghanistan. And that is the big loss, in fact. As for the grants, our duty is to highlight what are the needs of of Afghanistan. The needs are clear. In order to maintain the pre-COVID-19 government expenditure levels, which were not sufficient, in fact, to achieve all the Afghanistan SDGs. But in order to achieve that, in the next 4 or 5 years, donors need to increase grant funding by 30%. Now, the report also says it is not only an increase in grant funding that could bridge this gap. We also need to do a lot of reforms in the way we spend money in Afghanistan, the way the government spends money, efficiency of spending, more targeted spending to Afghanistan SDGs, and more cooperation between the donors, the government, and the UN. This tripartite work has to be much more efficient in the next years to come. Thank you.
تشکر از سوالتان. مگر من به انگلیسی گپ میزنم به خاطر که کلی کسایی که از بیرون هستن درست درک بکنن. The vision of the president and the political leadership in the government is to break the vicious cycle of poverty and conflict. We have become an aid-dependent country. It's not new, and unfortunately, it is the case right now. And there are many studies about aid effectiveness. And people say that, unfortunately, we have lived through it, and we have seen that the effectiveness of aid is questionable in Afghanistan. We reduced lately, not a paper, but at least numbers that indicates that 60% of all aids donated to Afghanistan is spent by third party, or what we call it, third party governments. These are mainly NGOs, and unfortunately, they are not being accountable. When we talk about accountability, it has to be both sides, the government and non-government organizations. And this has been the case. And once again, the demand from the government side is that we have to take more responsibility even for the aid money, because after all, it is the Afghan government that is accountable, responsible to the Afghan people, because it's an elected government. And therefore, we requested our international partners to please channel bulk of aid through the Afghan government. You know all the challenges that exist in the Afghan government, but this is the way we are thinking about it. So, so far, until very long time, the money spent in Afghanistan immediately was on emergency humanitarian assistance. Then later on, that was called stabilization. And I fully agree with our UNDP colleagues, and especially Dr. Dardari, because he understands very well this region, that we have to move to the development. What is very important for us is to spend money on development. We have seen the efforts of humanitarian assistance, that was the emergency, and then we saw the effect of the stabilization in Afghanistan. This is why the leadership is very keen to move to the phase of development, despite the continuation of conflict and insurgency and all of that, because we want to ultimately rely on our own resources, live with our own resources, and become independent. We will not become independent of aid, but at least aid must be more effective and well managed. So that is the vision of the government. I don't have the data about to tell you how the Afghan economy, how far as it has contracted. But one thing that we know from our side is that the reason the impact on the COVID-19, the Afghan economy, is not as significant in many other countries. These are numbers that we have to look at it. I don't know how the Albania Institute has gathered its data, because we have to look at it at the source of the data. But one thing we could say for sure, that we have been able to manage the crisis and the aftermath of the crisis, which requires robust policies. We are hopefully looking forward with think tanks and independent research institutions also to assist us. And we are very keen to address the aftermath of the pandemic as well. Thank you.
And if there is no questions from the colleagues in the hall, Mr. Dardari will have closing remarks followed by comments.
Okay, thank you very much for being here with us today. Thank you for the presenters and the discussants. I would like to ask the resident coordinator to give us his final remarks.
Just before the day starts, just for colleagues here, we also have arranged lunch, so you can stay, you can have lunch buffet at the restaurant.
Thank you very much. First of all, Mr. Harun, Mr. Nabi Saroush, Dr. Dardari, colleagues from the Rumi Institute, colleagues from media. I think this was an impressive event, very good exchange of the ideas. And, you know, in my life, I have done a lot of economic projections and various studies. The analytics is important, the figures are important. What this report is saying that the economy will contract by 6% of GDP. But what is more important is, particularly in the context of the country where we live, where most of the economy is informal, where we do not have the exact figures, is not exactly how much it is, but what it is that we're going to do about it. And what we need to do about it, where I come from, I could echo a lot of sentiments which I hear in Afghanistan, which is very little grace is dependency. So we do not want to see this dependency continue, and therefore the type of the programs which we will put in place to support the SDGs, the innovation, the bridging of the digital divide, giving the people opportunity to carry it forward is very important. I thank you for today's participation. Thank you, UNDP, for their intellectual leadership, the Bureau Institute for providing the analytics, and of course, the government represented here by the Office of the First Vice President and by the Ministry of Economy, Dr. Harun Mir, Dr. Nabi Saroush. Thank you all for this participation today, and please have a nice day. Thank you.
You have time for questions? Yes.